G'day, and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life. And this is my brother Anthony. Funny story behind this one actually. My wife and I got married a few weeks ago, and when we turned up to our hotel room at the end of the day, this was waiting for us behind the door. Gave us a bit of a shock. So Anthony is certainly a bit of a funny guy, but what he is not is a vehicle owner. If I'm Kiwi Car Life, well then Anthony is Kiwi public transport and leeching off of our parents' 2010 Honda Fit with dents on every panel life. However, today, all that is about to change. As Anthony is a recent software engineering graduate, naturally he wasn't going to settle for a crummy Toyota Vitz or Honda Fit. He actually wanted some features like cruise control, Bluetooth, push button start, reversing camera, and an engine that makes more than 2 digits of power, not paired with a CVT. So naturally I steered him towards something European. However, this creates a bit of a problem because in the 2010s, the Europeans became quite good at making pretty reliable and fuel-efficient 6 and 8 cylinder engines, but that's a little bit overkill for Anthony. A turbocharged 4-cylinder would be plenty for him, but European 4-cylinders in the 2010s were positively terrible. Audi and Volkswagen's 1.4 turbo and BMW's 1.6 turbo used in the A1, the A3 and the BMW 1 series in the early 2010s are known for catastrophic timing chain failure, oil consumption, transmission issues with the DSGs and many more. We did try looking for a slightly more reliable 1.8 turbo 8V Audi A3, but they're pretty hard to find under his budget of 10 grand. Fortunately though, in 2015, BMW launched a range of new engines, the B38, B48 and B58. 3, 4 and 6-cylinder turbocharged engines, all part of the same engine architecture. They even all have the same bore and stroke. And as many will be aware, the B58 has proved to be a pretty decently reliable and extremely capable power plant. And the B38 is basically just half a B58. By pure chance, when I happened to look on Turner's Damaged a few weeks ago, this B38 powered 118i was on there, with only a few small problems. It needed a warrant of fitness in a couple months' time, the rear tyres were getting low, the left front door wouldn't lock, and it had a drivetrain fault on. That fault did worry me a little, but BMWs can sometimes overreact to fairly small things. For all I knew, it could just be a dead coil pack causing a misfire, an easy $40 fix. So I took a bit of a risk, bidded, and got it for just $4,050.
After winning the auction, I had a stroke of luck. A friend of mine had just bought an R32 that he needed transporting to Auckland. So a few days later, I hit the road in his shiny red Golf, and after delivering that to Sam, I drove home the next day in Anthony's new 118i. Upon arriving back, I fixed 2 of the car's 3 most obvious issues. The first was to replace the passenger side door lock actuator. I removed the door card, peeled away the vapor barrier, and undid the 3 bolts holding the actuator in place. With the new one installed, now all of the doors locked and unlocked as they should. I also replaced the cracking trim around the shift knob, but the final problem was a lot less easy to fix. The drivetrain fault. As you'd expect for a well-serviced, one-owner car, it drove absolutely perfectly, but it just had absolutely no power, and we couldn't figure out why. We put the BMW software on the car to compare the expected boost reading with the actual boost reading, and while it was making a little bit of boost, it always fell short of the expected value, which would eventually kick the car back into limp mode. We inspected the turbine, which seemed fine and had no play. We adjusted the wastegate actuator and ran a relearn, which also didn't work. I even took it in for a smoke test to check for boost leaks. As far as I was concerned, there seemed to be no problems with any of the sensors or hoses, so this left only one conclusion: the turbo was shot. So on my next trip to Auckland, when I picked up my manual Porsche Cayenne project that'll be on the channel soon, I got a used turbo assembly from a wrecker and set to work getting it installed. Fortunately, despite the engine being mounted quite far back, removing it wasn't anywhere near as hard as you'd expect. I removed the airbox, the plastic inlet hose and lower intercooler pipe, along with the oil send and return lines and the exhaust clamp. Then there's just 8 bolts holding the whole turbo assembly to the block. Fortunately, accessing 7 of these 8 is very easy, but there's just one that's mounted underneath the turbo housing, which is extremely hard to access. To give myself more room, I ended up dismantling the air side of the turbo and managed to squeeze a 10mm spanner in there to flick it a quarter of a turn. Then all hell broke loose in there as the manifold separated just enough that caused a torrent of coolant to come gushing out. Nonetheless, I eventually managed to shimmy the old turbo out of there and set to work installing the new one. Now that I knew a bit more about what I was doing, getting the new turbo on was much easier. I slid it into place, did up 7 out of the 8 bolts, just in case I had to remove it again, and then bolted up the exhaust clamp, the oil lines and the intake pipes, and after just a morning's work, the 118i was ready for a test drive.
it starts. There's smoke coming out of there, but... And yeah, there we go, look at that, that's more like it.
Having confirmed the fault was now fixed, I moved on to the exterior and began by giving the car a good wash. Fortunately, aside from the filthy wheels, the exterior paint was actually in really good shape, so after rinsing and drying it off, I was ready to start polishing. I attacked a couple of particularly noticeable scratches, which came off easily, and then touched up a couple of areas where the paint had been chipped or scraped off. Finally, I installed some new BMW plate frames to return the car to its dealer fresh look. And finally, I moved inside and set to work vacuuming. Just like with the exterior, as the car had only one previous owner, it was all generally in great shape inside. After cleaning the carpets, wiping down all of the plastics and cleaning the windows, Anthony's new car was all ready to go.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to feel the boost, a feature this car has been without for some time. Wow, one thing's for sure, even despite the turbo replacement, this is not an especially fast car, I must say. According to the sport displays, it is now making all the power and torque that it should, and when you put your foot down it feels moderately grunty, but I can't say it feels that much quicker than my wife's 1 litre turbocharged Polo. But the reality is, Anthony doesn't really care all that much about performance, he just wants a nice and efficient car. And this car does those two things very well. It is extremely comfortable, very quiet and nice and easy to drive. And on my way home from Auckland, even without a turbocharger, I was doing just over 5 litres per 100k, which is not half bad at all. So while it's definitely fair to say that I'm not exactly going to be lining up for a 100 kilowatt 3-cylinder 1 Series anytime soon, I much prefer this car in front of us here, a 130i like what I used to have, or my old M135i. Nonetheless, for Anthony's purposes, this little 118i will be just fine. And so with that, I hope you've enjoyed the restoration of Anthony's new 118i. I think it's come out really nice. If you'd like to see some other restorations that I've done in the past, then click the playlist popping up right about now, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next time.